I love homecoming. I love it all. When we worship together as one people, when we come to the table, we begin a new year together. There's always a swirl of emotions in the room, and today is no different. For some of us, there's joy, a new baby, a promotion, a fresh start. For others, there's heartbreak, a diagnosis, a fractured relationship, an empty chair at the table. For most of us, it's probably a mixture of both, right? We come here to worship as we are. Some of you are rested and hopeful. Some of you are exhausted and anxious. And the truth is, as much as we would like it to be different, we bring life into the sanctuary. Life is here with us today. And on top of what you may be carrying personally, we're living in an age of constant noise. The endless scroll of headlines and ads and propaganda across all of our devices, competing for our hearts, competing for our attention. The poet Rosemary Watala Traumer, in her poem "For When People Ask," speaks to where many of us are most of the days of our lives and where many of us are, I suspect, today. She writes, "I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want the word that says I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird singing only one note at a time, but more like a tuvan throat singer able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 high harmonics above it. A sound, the tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl. How the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so we might walk more openly into this world so rife with destruction, this world so ripe with joy." Have you felt that swirl? Have you felt that swirl? Have you felt that swirl? You're not alone. You're not alone. And here's the deal. If you're feeling that, it's not a sign that you're doing life wrong. No. It's a sign that you're actually awake. You still have a pulse. You still care. There's a lot wrong in the world, as the prophets have always reminded us. That's why we're going to focus on the prophets in our sermon series, in our small groups. And over the next 5 weeks, we're going to hear 5 voices: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Ezekiel, and Jesus. And you'll hear about Amos if you show up on Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. And I'm including Jesus because we can't understand Jesus without understanding the fact that he saw himself as part of the prophetic tradition. We've sanitized away that part of Jesus, but it is clear in the Gospels. That's where he stands. Together we'll explore how the tears of the prophets help us to see what God sees and feel what God feels, if we could even imagine that. Because the prophets were never fortune tellers. They weren't simply predicting the coming of Jesus, which is what many of us were taught. Don't pay attention to them. They're only just pointing to Jesus. No, they were truth tellers with tender hearts, standing so close to God that they couldn't help but name where God's heart was breaking and where God's hope was still burning. And as followers of Jesus, part of our calling is to speak honestly about what is broken, to hold fast to what is beautiful, and to give voice to our tears and to God's tears. So today we turn to the prophet Isaiah. As Jamelia read so beautifully, Isaiah's call begins not with a plan, but with an encounter. In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord high and lifted up. We just sang that. And the hem of his robe filled the temple, and the thresholds shake. Smoke fills the room. Angels cry out, holy, 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 as we just cried out. And Isaiah, he doesn't puff up with confidence. He collapses into honesty. Woe is me. I am lost. I am a man of unclean lips living among a people of unclean lips. This isn't self-loathing, it's clarity. In the presence of God, Isaiah sees himself, he sees his community, he sees the world as it really is. And then grace enters. Notice that. A seraph takes a burning coal and touches Isaiah's lips. His guilt departs. His shame is lifted. He is forgiven before he is sent. And then God asks, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And Isaiah, freshly humbled, freshly healed, says, here I am, send me. And I think the order matters here. Awe, woe, grace, sent. And here's the connection for us as Presbyterians. Our form of worship is shaped by this very text, Isaiah 6. We gather in awe and praise, as we just did. We face reality, not as we want it to be, but as it really is. And we hear the word proclaimed right in the midst of that reality. And then we're sent into the world to embody the change that we long to see. But you don't have to be in the sanctuary to experience this mystery, this awe and woe. A parent sitting at a kitchen table after an argument with a teenager, realizing that you don't have all the answers. You know that place. A young adult starting a new job, caught between excitement and self-doubt. You know that place. A young couple quietly holding hands in the waiting room, praying for news they know they can't control. You know that place. A retiree wondering what comes next now that the calendar is open, but the sense of purpose feels less clear. You know that place. An elderly adult sitting in a quiet house, missing the voice of someone they loved for a lifetime. You know that place. Place of awe and woe. These are Isaiah moments. These are threshold moments. Times when our certainties shake and the ground beneath us feels less solid than we thought it was. And what Isaiah shows us is that God meets us there, in the swirl, in the smoke, in the shaking. Holiness is not reserved for the mountaintop. The divine comes into the mess to meet you and me. And yet when God comes close, something in us wakes up. It has to. We begin to see the world as it really is, the beauty and the brokenness. And we can't stay indifferent. That's why the prophets speak with such urgency all the time. I think the prophets make us Presbyterians a little bit uncomfortable, don't they? It's the anger. We just don't know what to do with the anger of the prophets. And it is true, the prophets are angry. All of them begin there. And some of them actually don't really get much past that. But as Richard Rohr points out in the book that we'll read together, if they stay close to God, they eventually move from anger into holy tears. If you read the early chapters of Isaiah, you'll see the prophet railing against injustice, against exploitation, against corrupt leaders, against those who grind the faces of the poor. Isaiah is furious at systems that benefit the powerful and the privileged and crush the most vulnerable. And isn't that where much of your anger and mine begins, doesn't it? When we see wealth piling up in fewer and fewer hands, why the children of the world go hungry. When leaders protect power and privilege instead of people. When leaders seem more interested in performance than in compromise. When violence keeps breaking the same communities over and over and over again, and the cycle of injustice remains unbroken. Isaiah sees what we see. Isaiah feels what we feel, but there's the turning point here. By the time we reach Isaiah 53, something has shifted in the prophet. Instead of calling down judgment, he speaks of this suffering servant. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, and by his wounds we are healed. This is the journey that Isaiah takes us on, from outrage to tears to compassion. And when we stay close to the pain, grief will rise beneath the anger. And we grieve the reality of children going hungry in one of the wealthiest nations on this earth. We grieve partisan divisions, destroying families and friendships. We grieve innocent lives being lost in Gaza and Ukraine and Sudan and Maui and in Patterson. We grieve when life feels fragile and unfair. And yet the prophets invite us to let those tears become sight, become vision. Richard Rohr says that only those who have cried deeply see things clearly. It reminds me of a Native American saying that we use in our men's ministry. A young man who can't cry is a savage. We got a lot of savages. And an old man who can't laugh is a fool. Tears soften the heart. Laughter loosens our grip. Without tears, we grow hard and bitter and brittle. Without laughter, we grow cynical and cold, and both are holy, both are necessary, and both make us more human. Isaiah teaches us that tears are not weakness, they are holy ground. Our tears connect us to God's compassion, and our tears send us into the world not as critics or cynics, but as healers. As healers. When Nicole and I first found out we were having a baby, I remember months of worrying whether I'd be ready to be a father. I read the books, I prayed the prayers, but deep down I felt unprepared. And then our daughter was born, and I held her for the first time. This impossibly small, beautiful human being. And the thought came rushing into me, I'm a father. I wasn't ready, but that's not the point. My spiritual mentor had been saying to years, Marc, the work will teach you how to do it. The work will teach you how to do it. And he was right. We learn by doing. I would learn to be a father by being one, and I'm still learning how to be a father. Isaiah wasn't ready either. He just said, here I am, Lord, send me. That's all God needs in your life and mine. God does not need our perfection. God needs our willingness. Are you willing? As we enter this season, I want to just lift up very briefly 3 practices that are inspired by this story of Isaiah, the call story. Number 1, trade performance for presence. When you're tempted to prove yourself or to perform for others, choose to be real. Isaiah does not show up with his resume, his elevator speech. He shows up humble and he shows up human. And maybe the most faithful thing you can do this year is stop pretending you're fine. So stop. God will work with honesty. Number 2, let God's grace touch the part of you that speaks. And it doesn't have to be with words, because we know it's better to speak with action. Isaiah's lips are touched because his voice will carry God's message. And where do you need grace to touch your life this year? Is it the way you speak to your kids or your partner or your parents? Is it the way you lead at work? Is it the way you volunteer at church? Is it the way that you care for a loved one? Or is it simply finding your voice with what matters most in your life? And number 3, be content to be willing. Isaiah never says, I'm ready. And I don't know about you, but I don't trust anybody who says they're ready. I don't. He says, I'm willing. I'm willing. God calls imperfect, ordinary, swirling people, just read the Bible, people just like us. And where in your life are you saying, I'm not ready? The truth is, we rarely ever feel ready. But maybe readiness is not the point. Maybe the invitation is to trust that God will work with your willingness to feel the fear and to do it anyway, to take that step and to see what God will do in and through and in spite of you. I imagine Isaiah spent the rest of his life hearing the echo of those seraphs singing, holy, holy, holy. Because the truth is, God's glory is not simply about separateness, it's about nearness. God calls us in the swirl, in the awe, in the woe, in the wonder of our lives, so that like Isaiah, we can say, here I am, send me. So let that be our prayer this fall. Lord, send me into my workplace, my family, my neighborhood, not perfect, but open. Send me into the heartbreak of the world and the beauty of it too. Send me to carry your compassion wherever it's been missing. Because Isaiah begins where we begin. Okay and not okay. Devastated and stunned with joy. Angry and hopeful. Wounded and loved. So let's bring all of it, our swirl of faith and doubt, hope and heartbreak before God, and trust that the ground that we are standing on right now is holy ground. So here we are. Send us, Lord. Amen.